What actually triggered the Viking Age in the first place? While we now understand Vikings as complex people with sophisticated social structures, this still doesn't explain why, around 793 CE, these Norse farmers and traders suddenly began sailing from their homeland to raid, trade, and settle across Europe and beyond. The explosion of Viking activity that transformed early medieval Europe didn't happen by accident. A perfect storm of factors came together to launch one of history's most influential expansion movements. What would make thousands of people leave their homes to sail into the unknown on dangerous wooden ships? When we see Vikings in movies, the answer seems simple. They were violent warriors who loved adventure and plunder. But history tells a more complex story. The massive expansion that sent Norse people across Europe, into Russia, and even to North America wasn't driven by simple bloodlust. These weren't just warriors looking for a fight. They were people responding to serious problems at home. Population growth created real pressure in Scandinavia during the 8th century. Archaeological evidence shows a significant increase in the number of farms and settlements across Norway, Denmark, and Sweden in the years leading up to the Viking Age. More people meant more mouths to feed, but Scandinavia had limited farmland. Much of the region consists of mountains, forests, and terrain that can't support crops. The good farmland was already divided and subdivided among families over generations. Think about what this meant for young people in Viking society. If you were a younger son in a Norse family, you wouldn't inherit the family farm that went to the oldest son. What were your options? You could continue living on your brother's land as a dependent, try to clear new farmland from difficult terrain, or look for opportunities elsewhere. When ships started returning from early raids with valuable goods, many young men saw a path to wealth and land that wasn't available at home. Climate change played a significant role too. Between 800–1000 CE, Europe experienced what scientists call the medieval warm period. This climate shift brought warmer temperatures that actually benefited some parts of Europe, making farming easier in places like England and France. But for Scandinavia, the changes weren't always positive. Tree ring studies and ice core samples show periods of unusual weather patterns and potentially difficult growing conditions in parts of the Norse homelands. The changing climate opened new sailing routes by reducing ice in northern seas. Suddenly, voyages that had been too dangerous became possible. The sea route around the north of Britain became more reliably ice-free, opening access to Ireland and Scotland. Warmer conditions also made the North Atlantic crossings to Iceland and eventually Greenland possible for the first time. The Norse colony in Greenland could only exist because of this warmer period. When the climate cooled again in later centuries, these settlements failed. Political changes pushed many people to seek new homes. The early Viking Age coincided with the emergence of stronger kings in Scandinavia who began consolidating power. Harald Fairhair's famous unification of Norway around 870 CE forced many independent-minded chieftains and their followers to leave rather than submit to his rule. Similar processes occurred in Denmark under kings like Godfred and later Nut. Many of the first settlers in Iceland were directly fleeing this political consolidation, preferring dangerous freedom abroad to submission at home. We can see this pattern clearly in Iceland's settlement. The Icelandic sagas specifically state that many settlers came to escape the tyranny of Harald Fairhair. Archaeological evidence confirms a massive population movement from Norway to Iceland between 870 to 930 CE. These weren't raiders, but farmers looking for land where they could live by their own rules. They brought entire families' livestock and farming equipment, clearly planning permanent settlement, not just quick raids. Technological advances created new possibilities just when these pressures were building. The development of the Viking longship around the 8th century suddenly gave Norse people the ability to travel farther, faster, and with more cargo than ever before. These ships could cross open ocean, yet still navigate shallow rivers. They could land on beaches without needing harbors. The technology arrived at exactly the right moment to turn local pressure into global expansion. existing trade networks exposed Vikings to the wealth available in other parts of Europe. Norse traders had long maintained contact with trading centers like Hedeby and Dorstad. They knew about the rich monasteries of Britain and Ireland, the fertile farms of Francia, and the wealthy cities of the Mediterranean. When internal pressures made staying home less attractive, these known destinations offered tempting opportunities. They weren't venturing into complete unknowns, but toward places they had heard about through trade contacts. Early success created a snowball effect. The first raids brought back enough wealth to fund more ships and attract more participants. Monasteries with their gold and silver made particularly tempting targets. They were often located near the coast, poorly defended, and filled with valuable items. The success of early raids on places, like Lindisfarne in 793, encouraged more raiding. As word spread of opportunities abroad, more Norse people chose to look outward rather than struggle with limited options at home. Viking expansion followed a pattern that reveals its underlying causes. The first phase involved seasonal raiding, quick attacks followed by a return home. The second phase established trading posts and winter bases that operated year-round but weren't permanent settlements. The final phase involved actual colonization with families, farms, and new communities. This progression from raiding to settlement shows that while initial contacts might be violent, the ultimate goal for many Vikings was finding new places to live and thrive. Different regions experienced different types of Viking activity. England and Francia suffered raids, but also saw settlement in places like the Danelaw. Ireland experienced both raids and the establishment of trading towns like Dublin. Russia saw Scandinavian traders establishing routes along rivers, founding cities, and eventually blending with local populations to create the Kievan Rus state. Iceland and Greenland experienced almost pure settlement without raiding. These variations show Vikings adapted their approach based on local conditions and their own needs. The areas Vikings settled permanently tell us much about their motivations. Iceland had no native population to raid, no existing cities to attack, and no ready wealth to steal. It offered only one thing: empty land for farming. The massive Norse migration to Iceland shows that many Vikings were simply looking for farms and independence, not battles and plunder. Similarly, the Norse colonies in Greenland represented planned agricultural settlements, not raiding bases. An important point often overlooked is that going Viking was often a temporary career, not a lifetime identity. Many Norse men went on raids or trading expeditions for a few years in their youth, earned enough wealth to establish themselves, and then returned home to become farmers for the rest of their lives. The archaeological record shows many wealthy farms in Scandinavia owned by men who used their raid or trade profits to establish themselves as respectable landowners. Why did Vikings suddenly expand beyond Scandinavia in the first place? A combination of population pressure, climate change, political shifts, and technological advances created both the need and the means for expansion. These factors came together in the late 8th century to create perfect conditions for the explosion of Norse activity we call the Viking Age. It wasn't simple bloodlust, but a complex response to real challenges at home and opportunities abroad. Understanding these motivations helps us see Vikings as real people responding to challenges rather than one-dimensional raiders. They made rational choices based on the options available to them. When we recognize the pressures that drove Viking expansion, we can appreciate the Norse not just as warriors, but as farmers seeking land, political refugees fleeing centralized power, traders looking for opportunity, and explorers pushing the boundaries of the known world. So we've seen that Vikings were far more than the one-dimensional raiders from our TV screens. They were skilled traders who created networks spanning 3 continents. They were master craftspeople who produced intricate art that still amazes us today. They were innovative shipbuilders whose vessels revolutionized travel. They were explorers who reached North America 500 years before Columbus. The next time you see those stereotypical horned helmets, remember the real Vikings behind the myths. Their legacy surrounds us. in place names across Europe, in words we use daily, in navigation techniques still studied by sailors, and in art styles that continue to influence modern designers.